It was just after 6 a.m. when the first light of dawn crept over the rooftops of Silver Creek, Virginia. The sky was still a soft, watercolor blue, the world quiet except for the hum of street lamps switching off and the early morning rustle of trees in the breeze. Special Agent Maya Ellis pulled her black SUV into the narrow cul-de-sac at the edge of the neighborhood, her sharp eyes scanning the row of neat houses that stood like silent sentinels. She reached over to the passenger seat, checked her badge and ID for the third time, then took a long breath, centering herself. It was a familiar ritual, one she had practiced countless times over the years. But today felt different, not because the mission was especially dangerous, but because it was close to home. Personal. Maya had been tracking Raymond Callahan, a suspect in a multi-state human trafficking case, for over 6 months. He was smart, slippery, and had managed to disappear just as the bureau was ready to move in. But last night, a new lead placed him in this very neighborhood, in a blue, single-story house with white shutters and a mailbox leaning slightly to the left. It seemed too ordinary, too peaceful. That was always the most dangerous part. Evil didn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it wore slippers and waved politely to the mailman. She stepped out of her vehicle, adjusting the blazer that covered her shoulder holster, the early morning air cool against her skin. Her fingers brushed against the badge clipped to her waist, a quiet reassurance. She walked slowly toward the house, careful, observant. She wasn't here to storm the place, just to verify. A soft knock. A pause. Nothing. She turned back toward her car to radio in when she heard the sharp blare of a siren. Her muscles tensed. A police cruiser skidded to a halt behind her vehicle, lights flashing. 2 officers jumped out, both white men, both already moving with urgency that felt misplaced. One, tall with a square jaw and buzz cut, took the lead. The other, younger, with a softer face and a hesitant gait, followed behind. "Ma'am, step away from the house," the lead officer barked, already reaching for his belt. Maya turned slowly, hands slightly raised to show she wasn't a threat. Her calm voice didn't waver. "I'm Special Agent Maya Ellis, FBI. I'm conducting." "Don't move," the officer shouted, drawing his gun. The neighborhood went still, the tension thick and immediate. The younger cop hesitated, glancing sideways at his partner. "Sarge, I think." "I said don't move," the sergeant yelled again, eyes locked on Maya like she was a threat. She remained composed, her voice steel. "I have my badge. It's right here. Please let me reach for it slowly." "Yeah, right," he sneered. "FBI, huh? That's a new one." His lips curled into a grin. "Next thing you'll tell me is you're the President of the United States." Maya didn't blink. "Sir, I am a federal agent. You're pointing a loaded weapon at a government official. This is a serious violation." But he only laughed. A loud, ugly sound that echoed down the street. "You? An agent? Come on. I've seen better lies from high schoolers trying to skip class." The younger cop shifted, uncertain. "Sarge, maybe we should just—" "Shut up, Travers," the sergeant snapped. In that moment, everything seemed to slow. Maya stood motionless, her posture strong but non-threatening. Her pulse throbbed in her ears, not from fear, she had faced armed men before, but from the deeper sting of humiliation. Disrespect. The kind born not of ignorance, but of willful denial. Her credentials, her position, her humanity, all invisible to the man with the gun. Then the rumble of tires on asphalt. Another SUV came to a screeching stop, black with tinted windows and a faint strobe of red and blue flickering from within. The doors burst open, and 4 FBI agents in windbreakers spilled out, weapons drawn, moving in perfect coordination. "Drop your weapon," the lead agent shouted. His voice sliced through the air like a blade. The sergeant's smirk vanished. His hand froze, then dropped his gun. It hit the pavement with a hollow clatter. Travers raised his hands instantly, stepping back. Agent Ramirez, the gruff, broad-shouldered man in charge, stormed forward. "Sergeant Daniel Mercer, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice, threatening a federal officer, and unlawful use of force." Handcuffs clicked tight around Mercer's wrists. The smugness was gone. Now he just looked small. The weight of his actions settling in his gut like concrete. Maya still hadn't moved. Ramirez approached her, voice soft now. "Are you okay?" She nodded. "Yeah. I'm fine." "You handled that like a pro," he said. "I'm sorry you had to." She didn't answer right away. There wasn't much to say. This wasn't the first time she'd been mistaken for less than she was. Not the first time someone had looked at her and seen threat instead of authority. It probably wouldn't be the last. But every time, it chipped away at something sacred. Her peace. Her patience. The young officer, Travers, lingered nearby. After Mercer was driven away, he approached quietly, eyes low. "Agent Ellis," he said, voice strained. "I'm sorry. I should have said something. Done something." Maya looked at him, measured. "Why didn't you?" He swallowed. "He's my superior." I froze. She nodded slowly. "That fear you felt? That hesitation? Imagine living with that every day. Not because of rank, but because of skin." He winced, and silence stretched between them. "I'll do better," he said. "Do more," she replied. "Speak louder. Step in." He nodded again, firmer this time. "Yes, ma'am." That evening, the precinct was unusually quiet. Mercer sat in a holding cell, head in hands, the reality of his actions finally catching up to him. His badge had been confiscated. The department was scrambling. Press inquiries were already trickling in. And across town, Maya sat at her kitchen table, a warm cup of tea in her hands, her dog Moxie curled at her feet. She wasn't angry. Not in the way people expected. Her anger had long since been tempered into resolve. What she felt now was something deeper. Exhaustion. But also, clarity. She had faced down a man who saw her as less than human, and she hadn't flinched. Not because she had backup. But because she believed, in the rule of law, in the strength of her identity, in the resilience of truth. The phone buzzed. Ramirez again. "Media's asking for a statement." She sighed. "Let them talk. I'm not interested in the headlines." He paused. "There's a storm coming. Mercer's file wasn't clean. There are other complaints. We're uncovering a pattern." She looked out her window at the quiet street below. "Then let it come. Maybe it's time." The next day, something unexpected happened. Officer Travers showed up at FBI headquarters. Not in uniform. He wore a simple button-down, jeans, and carried a small notebook in his hand. Maya met him in the lobby. "I submitted a request," he said. "For transfer. Internal affairs." She raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because I want to be part of the solution," he said. "I've been quiet too long." She studied him. There was sincerity in his voice. Regret, too, but not the performative kind. The kind that grows roots and pushes a person to act. "All right," she said quietly. "Then start by listening." He nodded. "I will." They sat down over coffee, and what began as a stiff conversation turned into something real. They talked about implicit bias. About systemic failures. About what it felt like to be underestimated, unheard. Travers didn't deflect. He didn't defend. He just listened. And when it was his turn to speak, he didn't offer excuses. Just a promise. "I can't fix everything," he said. But I can start with myself. With my circle. And Maya believed him. In the weeks that followed, ripples began to spread. The department launched new de-escalation training. Officers of color were invited into leadership discussions. Community forums were held, not just as PR stunts, but as actual conversations. There was resistance, of course. Change never came easy. But it came. Slowly. Earnestly. And it all began with a gun, a laugh, and 2 minutes that revealed everything. The next morning broke with the scent of rain lingering in the air. The storm had passed in the night, washing the streets clean, leaving behind puddles that reflected the gray sky above. Maya sat in her car again, engine humming, fingers curled around a warm cup of coffee she barely tasted. She had slept only a few hours, her mind replaying every second of the incident, every look, every unspoken word. But as always, she was up before sunrise, dressed, prepared, steady. The day ahead promised more paperwork than action, internal review forms, field agent statements, liaison calls. Yet she knew better than anyone that these quiet days mattered too. They were the pieces that held justice together when the flash of lights faded. At the field office, everything looked the same, as if the ground hadn't shifted the day before. Agents moved through the halls, phones rang, printers hummed. But beneath it all, there was a different energy. When Maya walked in, a few heads lifted. A nod from Special Agent Lou. A subtle look of respect from Ramirez's assistant. No words exchanged. Just acknowledgement. She made her way to her desk where a sealed envelope awaited her. Her name written in precise ink. She recognized the handwriting, Ramirez. Inside was a single sheet. A transfer approval. Effective immediately, Maya had been appointed to lead a new interagency task force focused on racial bias and internal accountability across state departments. She stared at the page, heart pounding. This wasn't just a promotion. It was a statement. A shift. A crack in the wall. She didn't know what to feel, pride. Pressure. Maybe both. Maybe something deeper than either. She hadn't asked for it. Hadn't lobbied. But Ramirez must have seen the moment. Seen her choose composure, dignity, and the bigger picture in the face of humiliation and danger. The phone on her desk rang. She picked it up. "Ellis," she said, her voice crisp. A familiar voice answered. "Agent Ellis. This is Captain Nina Torres. Silver Creek PD." Maya straightened. "Yes, Captain. I wanted to speak with you personally before we move forward with any press statements. Officer Donnelly, the one who drew his weapon, is on suspension pending full review. Officer Kyle Reese has requested to speak to you directly. Off the record." Maya was silent for a moment. "I'll meet him," she said. The cafe was small, tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner in the quiet end of town. The kind of place where nobody was in a hurry and the coffee was served with real cream. Maya arrived early, took a booth near the back, and waited. She didn't wear her badge. She didn't need it here. Kyle arrived 10 minutes later, hat in hand, literally. He looked young without his uniform. Just a kid, barely out of training, trying to carry the weight of a profession built long before he was born. He sat down across from her, eyes unsure. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. Maya gave a single nod. I didn't know how to say this any other way," he began, fumbling with his hands. "That day, I saw you, and I didn't question my partner. I should have. I knew something felt off. But I froze. I followed. And when the other agents came, I saw it all. What I'd let happen. What I'd become part of." She said nothing, letting him speak. "I grew up in a town where there weren't many people who looked like you. Or even thought like you. I joined the force because I believed in protecting people. But no one ever taught us to protect everyone the same. We just followed the playbook. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. His voice cracked on the last word. She looked at him, really looked at him. Saw the weight in his shoulders, the desperation in his eyes. Officer Reese, she said gently, I don't need your apology for myself. I've seen worse. I've faced worse. But what matters is what you do next. What kind of officer you become. He nodded quickly. I want to be better. I want to learn. I don't know where to start. Maya reached into her bag and pulled out a small, worn copy of The Color of Law. She slid it across the table. Start here, she said. Then, keep going. Listen to voices that don't sound like yours. Sit in spaces that make you uncomfortable. Ask the hard questions. He took the book with both hands, like it was something sacred. Thank you, he whispered. She nodded once more. You don't need to thank me. Just do the work. That meeting stayed with her long after she left the cafe. Not because it healed the wound. But because it showed something rare, humility, the seed of change. And in her new role, she would need more of that. 100 times more. Weeks passed. Maya's task force grew, agents, officers, policy experts, community leaders. They began with listening sessions. No cameras. No speeches. Just real people, raw truths. Stories of profiling. Of fear. Of silence. Some cried. Some shouted. All were heard. She flew from city to city, town to town. Places where trust had cracked wide open. Where people looked at badges and saw only threats. She stood in church basements, school gyms, city halls, and listened. And sometimes, she spoke. Not as a victim. Not as a hero. But as a woman who had stood in both shadows and light, and chosen to keep walking. One night, after a long session in Memphis, she stepped outside to catch her breath. The air was thick with humidity, the night sky heavy with clouds. A woman followed her out, a grandmother named Lena who had spoken earlier about losing her grandson to a police stop gone wrong. I wanted to say thank you, Lena said softly. Maya shook her head. I don't deserve thanks. I just. No, Lena interrupted. You don't understand. For years, we've cried into empty rooms. We've shouted into silence. And now, someone's finally writing it down. That matters. You matter. Maya swallowed hard, the weight of Lena's words settling deep in her bones. She thought about her mother then. A schoolteacher in Birmingham who had marched in heels during the summer of '68. Who told Maya bedtime stories of warriors who didn't carry swords, but truth. She thought about every time she'd walked into a room and had to prove, again and again, that she belonged. And she thought about the world she still believed could be built. Not perfectly. Not quickly. But built, nonetheless. Later, when the task force's first report was published, it made national headlines. Not just for its data, but for its honesty. For calling out systemic failures. For offering real, hard, actionable change. Some departments resisted. Others embraced it. But the conversation had shifted. At a press conference, standing before a wall of cameras and flashing lights, Maya read a portion of the report aloud. We do not seek vengeance. We seek justice. We do not seek division. We seek understanding. And above all, we remember that every badge should be a promise, not a threat. The room was quiet when she finished. Then, applause. Not thunderous. Not unanimous. But real. Months later, she received a letter. Handwritten. No return address. It read. Agent Ellis. I watched the footage of that day in Silver Creek. I laughed, like so many others did, but not because it was funny. I laughed because I was nervous. Because I didn't know how else to face the truth. You stood taller than I ever could have. You reminded me that dignity doesn't come from a badge. It comes from choosing compassion over anger, truth over pride. I don't know you. But I won't forget you. Thank you. She folded the letter and placed it in her drawer beside her badge. In the end, the world didn't change overnight. But it changed. One conversation at a time. One hard truth spoken out loud. One young officer who asked how to begin again. And one woman, unshaken, who kept showing up. Because that's what courage looks like. Not the absence of fear. But the decision to keep walking forward, even when the path is uphill. Especially when the path is uphill. And that is how change is born. Not in the noise. But in the quiet, relentless power of those who refuse to give up.